Good morning and welcome everyone to HogvilleNET YouTube Live. I'm Kevin McPherson. We got a lot to get to today. It's the busiest part of the year, coaching carousel, which a year ago meant a lot at this time for Arkansas Razorbacks men's basketball. But of course, the transfer portal, keeping an eye this week as we move into a recruiting dead period for about a 7-day window there, April 3rd to the 10th. So that starts tomorrow on Thursday, April 3rd. And you've got most of the coaches around college basketball will be in San Antonio for meetings around the Final Four. That's a big part of that. So we're going to talk plenty of portal and as it relates to the Arkansas Razorbacks. During this segment, we're going to have another big focus on the front line and big men, some developments there. Nothing good yet in terms of something you could sink your teeth into for the Arkansas Razorbacks, but certainly some several still front, A-list kind of guys still out there. One off the board, of course, that Razorback fans were paying attention to. We're going to talk about Keshan Hall's Zoom call with John Calipari and the Arkansas coaching staff yesterday. I did an interview with him late last night, a follow-up interview on that Zoom call. I published an article at HogvilleNET regarding his comments, but we're going to talk about those here. I'm going to also bring a little bit of intel on Lamar Wilkerson and where things stand with him. We're going to talk retention. I've got a little bit more intel on retention. So we got a lot to get to, but the first thing I want to do is focus on the McDonald's All-American game. I always give this disclaimer with All-Star games. Don't get too high or too low based on great performances or poor performances. I will tell you that this 2025 McDonald's All-American class that has 2 future Hogs in it, 2 5-star Hogs that played in it last night, and a potential third, I will tell you that this is considered one of the best classes ever in a single high school class. I've talked about that going all the way back to last spring and summer when I was out on the road covering the top players in the country, interviewing the top players in the country, including guys like Malik Thomas and Nate Ament. They were among that group, the Boozer twins. I mean, I hit them at AJ DeBunce. I talked to all of them, watched all of them in person multiple times. But to see it pay off with the McDonald's All-American game, that is really the crescendo. That is the pinnacle. And again, you don't want to get too high or too low based on performances, but there are things you can parse out of it. I was glued to it last night, but it reminded me, I go all the way back to when Arkansas got Todd Day and Lee Mayberry out of that 1988 class. That McDonald's class was loaded as well. When you look throughout the years and decades, there are certain teams, certain groups of players from a high school class that are just considered to be better, whether it's all heavy at the top or it's distributed throughout that 24-player roster when you start looking ahead. And so the 88 class is one of the best ever, for sure. Not just because it had future Hogs in it, Todd Day and Lee Mayberry. It just was. I mean, Oliver Miller, God rest his soul, may he rest in peace, was in that same class and wasn't an All-American. That was just a loaded class. Well, so was 2025. And I thought just getting off to, let's just go ahead and say, the West ended up winning this game. I think it was 105-92. I wonder if some of the players are dragging their feet. We'll get to retention and some of the other stuff with recruits. But I thought 105-92 West beats East. Darius Acuff Jr. was starter on the East squad, as was Hog target Nate Ament. And the first thing that happened when this telecast started, I had my eye on it. I was explaining to my son, hey, the 2 Hogs, one of them's going to start on the East squad. You won't see the other player right away. He'll come off the bench, probably midway first quarter, Malik Thomas. And as I was explaining that, they were flashing the starters. And I was in shock because under Nate Ament's name, instead of saying undecided, the graphic said Louisville, like he was Louisville bound. So I paused. It went past that. I did a double take and it was already off the screen. So I rewound it and paused it for a minute. I had to tell my son, I'll get back to you here in a second. That threw me off. As far as I know, he's still undecided, or he's made that decision. ESPN knows about it and someone made a big mistake. Things like that happen. But he was to make his official announcement public on April 1st and he's postponed that. Always a target date, never not really a target date, because you're not pushing anything out if you never had a date set. It's non-specific. So that's just silly, the notion that was never a fixed date for a decision. It certainly was. And right now, as far as I know, while I come on here, it's still undecided, but that was on the graphic. All right, let's not spend too much time on that. Having Wagner back would be a huge pickup. Yeah, it would. Knox, Richmond, Wagner, Trevor in Brazil, Adu Thorough. We're going to talk retention. I like the comments already because I'm going to get back to them. But I thought Darius Jacob Jr., I put a list out of my top 7 McDonald's All-American performers. I had him at 5th. He would have actually been a little bit higher if he didn't shoot 1 for 8 from 3. And I thought there were times defensively where he decided what you see a lot in these All-American games where he's just going to stat you, stay planted, and not – there's a few lack of effort plays defensively from him, but most of it was really positive. I thought he absolutely – Darius Jacob Jr., the 6'2" guard academy, committed and signed with the Razorbacks back in November. In 5th top 5 player in the country. I thought he absolutely played with the best pace among all the players, but specifically primary ball handlers and guys that project that. Mikael Brown Jr., Caden Boozer, Trey Kinney, who's kind of a combo guard. But these were some of the other primary handlers in the game, and I thought Acuff played with absolutely the best pace. He had no problem shifting gears, using stop-and-go moves to get to the spots he wanted to, or just turning on the gas a little bit. Most every shot he got was an open look. He's got a nice little runner game. When we saw that on one of those stop-and-go moves, he literally scored at all 3 levels, Darius did. He had a 50 ball scrap that he won and had a little layup on the left side of the basket in the game. He had a little runner, was his first basket where he had a stop and go on a big that was trying to stay in front of him, and he just put the brakes on and then hit the gas and went right by him and had a little runner, little teardrop going to the basket from about 6 to 8 feet on that left side of the paint that he drove. And then he had a really nice dribble setup, step back. I think he was trying to get back to a 3-pointer. That college line's a little further out than the high school line. They were playing with a college line last night. So he had a foot on the line. So it was technically a deep mid-range shot. If you want to call that mid-range, I called it that just because it's inside the 3-point arc and it separates those descriptors. And then he did knock down one of his 8 3-point attempts. He was 3 of 4 at the free throw line. So 12 points. But what I liked about it, the 13-point loss, he was a box scorer +2. He did a really good job as a facilitator, led the team. He and Caden Boozer each had 4 assists, 0 turnovers in Acuff's 21 minutes. And in a game like that, you're like, okay, again, you can't read too much into it, but he played with control and pace better than anybody. And he was picking and choosing. He had some really good craft in his facilitation game, setting guys up. He got out in transition with Cameron Boozer, who very rarely, if he got a defensive rebound, he had 12 rebounds in this game, but very rarely got off the ball. He tried to go coast to coast like a 6'9" guard, and it was pretty ugly stuff, honestly. That took away from me from his double-double. I thought he did not, and it's an all-star game, so I'm not going to hold that against him, but for that performance, I didn't have Cameron Boozer, who was selected a co-MVP, the MVP of the East, because he had a double-double. I didn't think he played all that great overall, and I didn't have him in my top 7, but there was a rebound he got, and he dribbled up a little bit, and then he passed. He had 2 teammates running left and right in transition. He passed left to Acuff and worked his way to the basket. Acuff came in, worked his way from the left wing, coming more toward the center of the paint, and when he did, a defender adjusted. He just made a nice little drop-down pass. So many times you see a guy in an all-star setting, when they get that deep, they're just going to go all the way to the rim. He could have done that. He could have pulled up and hit a little 10-foot shot or gone all the way. Instead, he read the defense and made a nice read on it. Just a little dump down pass to Boozer for Cam Boozer for the finish. But in the second half, he had a really good. He was out high, I think top of the key, left side. Slightly, and he fired a pass to the right corner. So he flipped the court. It was one of those, skip passes effectively, but he put it on a rope, and he did it in a way that the defenders could not recover. It was a really nice setup pass for a knockdown 3. So he had some really good craft in his game, but I just go back to the pace and the shots. I mean, he was 3 of 6 from 2-point field goals, 3 of 4 at the foul line. I'm fine with all that. 1 of 8 from 3. Most of those were good open looks. I thought maybe he might have 2 or 3 of those were questionable in terms of taking it early and maybe, hunting a little bit. All-star game, all right. So I didn't really even have a problem with the 1 of 8 other than that some of those didn't go in. For the most part, I thought they were good shots. So you can't always discount a guy because he had an off shooting night. He was good from 2. He showed a variety of ways to score. He got to the free throw line. He was the best facilitator. Oh, by the way, he took care of the ball, and he had no problems. If you look at the 14 shots in total, he was open. Some of those little drives to the basket reminded me a little bit of not quite what DJ Wagner does, but a little bit of the Nick Smith, where Nick will do a little flip shot 6 or 8 feet to the basket, and it's pretty stuff, but he could have actually gone a little further and maybe made the shot a little easier. And Nick's still making those adjustments now in his second season coming to an end in the NBA, but I thought maybe Acuff could have gone a little deeper on a couple of that rimmed out on him. But I thought, again, I had him for ranked 5th in my top 7. I started off with Darren Peterson. He should be the number 1 player in the country. A lot of folks have him that. ESPN's tied very closely to Nike. Darren's not a Nike guy. To me, that's the only reason. It reminds me a few years ago of Bagley, the third, being ranked number 1 by ESPN, Nike guy, and Zion Williamson actually being the best player in the country, but playing on the Adidas circuit. Similar thing here. Darren Peterson going to Kansas. I think he's the top player, and right now the front runner to be the number 1 pick in the draft in a year. We'll see what happens, but right now that's how I have it. I had him as the best performer last night. I thought Chris Sinak really shows craft, that size. He can be physical. He's got skill. 6'10", 6'11", going to Houston. I had him number 2 on my board just from that game, just looking at it from what I saw, guys matching up just one night. It's not a stretch either based on how these guys are ranked. They're all top level 5 stars, right? It's not like I'm going out on a limb here. I thought, I can't pronounce his first name very well, Tunde Yosefo, who I covered at the Pine Bluff King Cotton Classic. And he's a 5-star, right? He's like a top 18, 19. And I tweeted this back in October. I'm like, I think he's underrated if a 5-star can be underrated. I don't think he's talked about enough. He's going to Baylor. He is a monster, 6'5", 6'6", athletically. He's strong. His defensive instincts are incredible. He is a above the rim, smasher. Really quick, good speed and quickness for a guy that's kind of built at his size. I mean, he's just, he moved around a little bit like Anthony Edwards last night. He doesn't have the polish and skill that Edwards has accumulated as a shooter and scorer, but just kind of athletically and the way he's kind of put together reminded me a little bit of that. But he had a really good game, especially defensively, jumping passing lanes, making defensive plays by anticipation, and then using that talent. And then 4th, I had Isaiah Harwell. He's also going to Houston, and this is why Houston has the number 2 recruiting class. I thought he was outstanding shot maker, good decision maker, played a really confident, strong game. He looked like a guy that could step on a college court right now and help a team. I say the same about Darius Acuff Jr. I think he's a guy that if he was plugged in this year at Arkansas, would have played and would have held his own. But I had him at 5th. At number 6, I had Nate Ament. I haven't even talked about Malik Thomas. I'll talk about Nate. I'll just say that I had him 6th, and I'm going to go into that. He might have even could have been higher on this list, honestly. But I had him at 6. And then 7th, I had Elijah Arenas, who reclassified from 26. God, he's 6'7". He's long. He can shoot. He's got a bag. He did some selfish things in this game, but just the combination of size, length, athleticism, and his shooting touch. Eric Patrick Mosman in USC got a really damn good basketball player. They're getting a talent. And I don't know what his age is relative to is he old enough that he can be a one and done? Will he be a Jaden Quaintance kind of guy that has to put in 2 years before he can go pro? Is there some rule change coming on that I don't know about where all one and dones regardless of age can just go? I don't know. But Elijah Arenas really stood out. I didn't have Cameron Boozer in my top 7, not because I'm a hater. I just, he did what guys do in all-star games. He made a lot of it about himself. And I thought he had a lot of turnovers. And even when he didn't have turnovers, he just screwed up opportunities. And it was part of why I thought his team lost 13. You could also make the case, well, he was also the reason his team didn't get beat worse than 13. That's probably true. And there's some other guys that maybe deserve, I thought Malachi Marino, who's going to Kentucky, had some good moments out there. But anyway, that was my top 7. I didn't have Malik in there. He only got 15 minutes. But here, I talked a lot about Acuff, and I mentioned he was a box score +2 when he was on the court, 21 minutes. Team loses by 13. Well, Malik played off the bench, 6'4" guard for the West, and he was a box score +4 in his 15 minutes. But what I really like about him is what I always like watching him play in person. He, at 6'4", he plays a little, it seems like he plays taller and bigger than that. He's got long arms, he's got long legs, he's got good bounce. He's a guy that's high energy. I'm going to make another Nick Smith Jr. comparison. He plays with a motor and energy. So despite some of the flaws and some of the gaps in decision at times, the energy level and the way that he goes after and attacks things reminds me a lot of Nick, and that's always a positive. It's one of the positives with the Charlotte Hornets. I get some intel and insight on some of these pro hogs on what those staffs think, and they love his activity and how hard he plays. This is Malik Thomas, in my opinion. He's one of those excitable guys that will get. I said it before. Remember when I interviewed him and covered him in Kansas City? I was on the record at that time back in May saying this is maybe my favorite player in this entire class because of his swagger, because of his the confidence, but also just the way he played, just his attitude about how he plays. Last night, he was maybe the least among the selfishness. I don't think I saw a selfish thing that he did. He really played a team kind of game, in a game where you see a lot of guys really trying to break something off individually. I thought he played really well in that regard. But he's got a smoothness to his game. I mentioned all that excited play and activity. There is also a smoothness to him when he gets into his finishing stride. He had an early basket after there was an offensive rebound, and he cut to the basket. There was a gap in the defense off that scramble off the offensive rebound. He got to the basket and just laid a nice little smooth layup over his shoulder. Not actually getting fully squared up. He just let his momentum and finished with touch. He had another shot that didn't stay down for him. I think it was in the second half or maybe it was later in the first half, but he drove, I think it was second quarter actually. He drove right and had laid up a really nice high layup attempt with touch as his momentum's carrying him out of bounds, high off the glass, over the outstretched arms of some guys trying to defend it, and it just missed. I mean, it was really good touch. It just came off the front of the rim. It didn't settle back in and roll back in for him. But it was one of those shots that you can tell he can make those. It was just beautiful craft there. And then he had a play where he got a defensive rebound on one end, dribbled up, kind of was searching for a driving angle on the left side at the top of the circle up there. There was a big man setting a pick for him. So he just took a step, backed out, went right, used that screen setup, kept the ball, went right, and pulled right up into a three-point shot attempt. So off the bounce. So he basically got a defensive rebound and cast that in for a three-point shot and showed some good craft there. Another three that didn't go down for him. Only took 5 field goal attempts, 6 points. He had 4 rebounds. He did have an assist, a nice pass. I think it was in the second half. There was a play where he was guarding Sean Abayev out high up just past midcourt, really hounding him defensively, and got Abayev to turn the ball over. Got a deflection. It went off of Abayev and out of bounds. So he forced a turnover. I believe it was Sean Abayev, who Arkansas recruited, and he actually visited before I think ended up at Cincinnati. But I also credited, I think the box score, I keep my own stats. The high school stat keepers at a lot of these events and these different things are off. The McDonald's All-American game did a good job. All of their stats match mine, field goal attempts, where they were from, rebounds, assists. The only things that don't match are the steals. I grade steals the same way the NBA does. And the NBA's been doing it this way for years after doing it kind of like everybody else. And they credit steals to guys that get deflections, purposeful deflections. So intentional deflections or a tap out and someone else on your team actually gains possession. That's the guy that got credited with steals. Well, I think on the high school level, they still do it that way. I don't. So I had both Acuff and Malik Thomas with 2 steals each. But and so there were times they were both active defensively. In games like that, the ball sprays a lot, and sometimes you just in the right place at the right time. But I thought both of them did a couple of things well defensively. I thought Malik was a little more locked in defensively, even though he had some mistakes maybe than Acuff defensively. So I thought both of them, relative to their minutes, relative to what was out there for them, Malik was maybe a little too unselfish. I thought there were 3 or 4 good shot opportunities for him, maybe more that he passed up, but okay, that's all right. He's not a bashful kind of guy, and I don't think it was about that. I thought it was really interesting. There were times where he was wide open, and when you saw the flow of what could have been there for him off of just a routine good pass, moving the ball to the next guy, teammates were selfish and looked away. One of them was with a big on a DHO opportunity. I don't know if that was as much about selfishness as it was confusion, but maybe a little bit, trying to figure out how I can get something here and waited too long. The other one was with Elijah Arenas not making the next pass and forcing something. But when the next dead ball came up, I noticed twice Malik took each player aside and was explaining to them what they should have done or what. I thought that was interesting because, bro, my man, this is an all-star game. The assignment is go get yours. And if you're not going to get yours, well, that's probably a missed opportunity. I think there's some good things you can take away from that, though, because you weren't forcing stuff. But at the same time, drilling down on a guy a little bit, even if it's, you're doing it constructively in that situation, that the next time down, the guy's going to do the same thing. He's going to go hunt his own. But I did kind of like that. I was keeping an eye on. I don't know if you noticed that or not, but in those dead ball situations, right after those 2 plays, he took both players, gathered them up, was explaining stuff to them. I thought that was kind of interesting. All right, so both guys did well. Nate Ament, 10 points, knocked down both of his threes. I talk about that's his superpower. And I keep talking about his skill level. He's a really good passer. He's got good handles. The only thing that I've mentioned over and over and over again, going back basically a year to when I covered him in mid-May at the Adidas event back in Bryan, Texas, when Calipari was there. It was Calipari's first live eval session as Arkansas's head coach. He'd only been on the job a little over a month. And I said, the further he tries to go, getting into the paint, is where physicality has a problem with. Well, you saw some of that. But, man, if you really want to nitpick, this guy, aside from strength, I mean, he was 3 of 6 overall from the field. He didn't just hunt shots all night. He's a willing passer, a good passer. He plays the right way. But he can handle the ball, pushing 6'10", bring the ball up the court. He got aggressive for a stretch there. I think it was probably second half more so, third quarter, maybe fourth, some too. But where he was finding ways to use his skill to get closer to the basket. Now, he didn't finish some of those shots, but he was right on the cusp of getting a basket. He was just a little bit off. And, the commentators are saying, that's 10 pounds away from being a bucket or something like that, a little more strength. There's no doubt about that. But this guy's craft is better than any of the players on that court that are, in my opinion, that are 6'8" or taller. Zero question. I'd put Chris Sinak as number 2 on that list as far as guys with size, length, height. Since we can't talk about Nate Ament in terms of size, in terms of girth, muscle, and strength yet. But his craft and his skill stands out. And I think this is why John Calipari continues to make him a priority. Now we'll see where it goes. And I'm not going to spend a whole lot of time on that because I don't have anything new on where that is with Arkansas other than it scared me seeing that graphic. I mentioned I've heard the figure for Arkansas's NIL offer to Nate Ament from a really good source, and it's stronger than I thought it would be. And it's certainly enough to get his attention and keep his attention. And it may be enough to win him over at the end of the day because you package that with what Calipari does to get players in the next level. I thought there were times where there was a good symbiosis with Nate Ament and Acuff because they started the game together and they were typically on the court together. I thought Nate Ament was, relative to what he tried to do and what he showed us, sometimes you got to just dig down beyond stats. And I felt like, man, he's everything I think he is with the potential to be even more. Now, is he a wing at the college level? Yeah, he's a big wing. Call him a jumbo wing. I like to use the phrase 3-4 combo because he can be. You don't have to worry about him being on the court necessarily. Let's say in tandem with Carter Knox. Let's just go through the McDonald's All-Americans and throw Carter Knox in there, who was a McDonald's All-American a year ago. Acuff, Malik Thomas. Let's just say that's on there. 1, 2, Carter at the 3, and you could have Nate Ament as another wing that brings length and height. You know he's going to be adding some strength over the summer by the time he gets there. But you could have those 4 on the court. And let's say that you had a physical enforcer at the 5, somebody on the floor at the 5 that we don't know yet because, Big Z's gone. He was not a physical enforcer anyway. Jonas Adu's gone. We're still waiting on Trevor Brazil. I've got more information on him, by the way, when I get to retention. Thomas is vocal. I like that comment, and then that can potentially go to leadership. So, I look at this as Ament as being a guy. Look how physical and strong Carter Knox is at your 3, and if you have he's not going to get pushed around. A guy like DJ Wagner. I just mentioned A-Cup. Let's say DJ Wagner's back and is on the court. Not every position has to be physical. Yes, a lot of times you want your frontline guys to be. But I have no problems with a front line with a guy that's 6'9", or pushing 6'10", that's got great length, very good athleticism, and all that skill. I mean, Trevor Brazil plays a lot at the 4. He's not physical. Now, he's a more explosive guy. He's certainly stronger than Ament, but he's a guy that can do a lot of things for you and knock down some threes. Ament is an elite three-point shooter. He's got a lot more skill and can create a lot more matchup problems. And then your concern is, well, how deep does he have to go then using some of that craft, because that ends up being somewhat of a problem. Okay, I grant you that. Defensively, he might have some issues in that small ball 3-4 spot on the college level, Nate Ament. But you may not have to keep him out there all the time in that position. The point is there's flexibility there. He can be your 3, or he at times can be the bigger of your 2-3 guys out there and be your small ball 4. And as he adds strength and bulk, it's not like he's just going to blow up and become Arnold Schwarzenegger, but there'll be a point where he's strong enough relative to what else, the other things he's doing, where he's not an eyesore in certain situations and a liability, defensively maybe, or being able to finish through some contact, get into the paint and dealing with that a little bit better. And again, if you watch as that game progressed, he figured out his moments to get closer to the basket. He used his pivot foot and changed the direction really well, like a guard. He's got guard skills, ball handler skills. So I love Nate Ament. I've spent a lot of time on that because Arkansas, as far as I know, if the ESPN graphic, if it's correct and then someone made a boo-boo there, those things happen, then the cat's kind of out of the bag. But for now, the talking points during the game by the commentators where he's still undecided. That's what all of us believe at this moment, unless something's changed since I've come on. Nearly 28 minutes in, I wanted to spend a lot of time on the McDonald's All-American game and the incoming guys, mainly because we have a bad habit. All of us do, especially when there's an early signing period. When we get to this point of the year and the portal's so big now, it's really your roster build. You can argue for most teams, it's mostly portal and it's not as much about the high school. That is true, even for the teams like Arkansas and Duke and Houston that are plucking multiple 5-star guys and McDonald's All-Americans. They've got to go load up in the portal too, even if it's not a sheer high amount of players based on retention and what they got out of the high school ranks. They still got to get some studs. So this is very important, but it's easy to lose sight of these guys that are going to factor in big. I mean, these aren't casual players. Darius Acuff Jr. and Malik Thomas are both going to factor in to what you're doing from day one. They're going to have built-in roles that are meaningful. Now they've got to go out and execute and prove it, but that's going to be the plan. So we needed to talk about those guys. All right, let's move in to portal stuff. I've kind of torn about how I wanted to start this, but I'm going to start with the front line because we could have started with retention and say, well, it kind of depends on what you're doing here with retention. We already have some signals from retention. Big Z's gone. We knew Jonas Adu, you couldn't retain him. We knew it was already a thin front line. We know even if you keep Trevor Brazil, which we're going to talk about, again, that's not a paint camper. He's not a space eater. He's not a guy that's impacting both ends in the paint defensively and offensively with carving out space and throwing his body around. Not that he doesn't impact the game in the paint and around the rim, because he does, but you need an enforcer. And Arkansas really didn't have that this year. Jonas Adu was the closest to it. Adu Thero playing, crashing down from the wing, going to the basket in a bully ball way. He did muscle a little bit inside defensively at times, but he's not a guy that's out there guarding fives and big fours, consistently, and then being a guy that is winning all those battles or a lot of those battles. That's just not really what his role is, and we don't know if you keep him or not anyway. So let's talk big men and what happened. Morez Johnson, the last time we were on, I spoke more about him than anybody when we were talking frontline. He and Yaxel Lindenborg. And Arkansas, I mentioned, this would be a guy that's high on your board. One, if not two. You're going to get two big men. That's something else I said the last time we were on. We're at a point now where you've got to. You got to get two. So we're not even talking about the importance of just getting one. Arkansas has 0 right now out of this portal, but that's not going to stay that way. And at some point, they're going to be at 2. And I think they're going to get A-list guys. We can debate that at some point, and we'll see what happens. But at least one A-list and potentially 2. But Morez Johnson, the freshman at Illinois, we talked so much about him on the last one yesterday, committed to Michigan. Now, look, I know what I was told the NIL offer was to him surprised me a little bit. I thought it was a bit low for the need and for the position. I mean, we can all have opinions. To the layman, when you hear some of these numbers, you're like, that's a small amount. But relative to what the landscape is in NIL, I wouldn't say that it was embarrassing or insulting, but I thought for what Arkansas's need is, combined with quality bigs being a premium and a specific need in a guy that's big and physical beyond just a frontline need, I thought that combination of things, I was a little surprised by the NIL offer. And I know they have a range and a negotiating range and a top end of that. That's how they operated last year. That's how they're going to operate again. But I was a little bit surprised by it. Again, it wasn't embarrassing. I just thought I had a picture in my mind of what it would likely be based on other players and the market and what I was specifically hearing that other teams might be doing with Morez. And I thought it was a little bit maybe off that just a little bit. And then you get, he's off to Michigan, and he put a final 6 list out. Arkansas was on it, as obviously was Michigan. And we know they're trying to replace, I think, Dusty May, Vlad Golden. They're trying to get more on that front line. I'm going blank on the 7-footer's name, the one that can, he and Amari Williams at Kentucky are similar. I thought the guy at Michigan was even better as a kind of a point center, could do a lot of things. But Morris Johnson, 6'9", 250, off to Michigan. So I always wondered, did Arkansas have even a chance to counter? Because there's always a counter. There's always a range, and so they have that ability. And were they just too weak out of the gates? I did have a question mark about it. So I'm not saying that now after the fact that he's off to Michigan. I was thinking it at the time when I heard the number. I'm like, okay, but that is what it is. So I won't go into the specifics on that, other than to say Morris Johnson's gone. So we can talk about Yaxel Lindenberg. Arkansas is one of the schools that contacted him. We spoke a lot about him the last time we were on. Reminds me a lot, I've said this before, of a Jalen Williams in terms of so many things he can do and qualities he brings to the court at both ends. You can run your offense through him. I mean, 17.7 points, 11.4 rebounds, 4.2 assists, 1.8 blocks, 1.7 steals, 52% field goal percentage, 35.7% from 3 on good volume, 75.7% from the free throw line. Alabama Birmingham transfer, 6'10", 240. He's also entered the NBA draft pool. He's a guy that may be a first rounder. So all this may be a moot point. But Arkansas, in the mix, the Hogs have contacted him. He's a 1A list. I mean, he may be, to me, he's the no-brainer kind of guy where he immediately improves your team. I don't care what pieces you have. that you bring in, that he's not going to, there's not an awkward fitting because of all the things he can do. He's versatile. That was what Jalen Williams was. He was a guy that could operate inside and out, situational basketball at the end of games. He was brilliant. I see this guy very, very similarly. So you would love to have him. I mean, as much as I thought Morez Johnson was a great fit and I thought Arkansas had some real momentum there, I was never convinced that it was a done deal for Arkansas. And part of that was looking at hearing that NIL figure. But Yaxel Lindeborg is a guy that you don't want to misstep on NIL because he's going to be a much higher premium guy. A much higher premium guy. I mean, I'm seeing players go. I reported this. I had multiple sources telling me that the guard from UNLV, I've gone blank on his name now. I should have wrote it down. Dayton Thomas. I always confuse names, but he's off to LSU. Got his NIL deal was approaching $2.5 million. Okay, good for him. But this Lindeborg guy, when you start looking around and what's kind of establishing the market, it feels like he could be between $3 to $4 million valuation for him. To go more than that, I don't know if you would, but maybe. I mean, he's just really special like that. Malik Renew. So let's move off of that. There's not a whole lot. The one thing I will tell you is one of my contacts with Kentucky beat writers reached out to me and told me that Mark Pope had met with him in Chicago, and it was a really good meeting. And when you look at what Pope is doing, I just said Lindenborg is not a he fits with everybody because of everything he can do. And at Kentucky, where they have they use a lot of players, so they use depth, they use their bench. But you could put him in any. I mean, he could be in that Amari Williams role. You could do a lot with him on the court in the way that they're going to do it because they like to stretch the floor. And this guy has so really good skill set. It's a good fit. I don't know where that goes and if Kentucky what happens there, but it's something to keep an eye on with him. And he's got a lot of skills. It's kind of a who's who. Malik Renew, we have not talked about it yet. I have not brought his name up yet. And the last time we were on was 2 days ago. And right after we came on, wasn't much, maybe a few hours after we were on, he released a top 5. And Arkansas's on it. Arkansas is one of the teams on there. Miami's on there. He played with Knight right as elite, Barry Dunning Jr. Back on the Nike EYBL circuit. I covered him. I was at some of those events and got to cover him, interview him. The previous coaching staff recruited him. Eric Patrick Melsman, EPM, when he was Razorbacks head coach. But Arkansas's in the mix there and top 5. Now, look, here's a guy that led Indiana this season in scoring. We know Indiana didn't have a great year. They were a bubble team, but 13.3 points. He averaged over 15 the previous season, 3 years. So he's a veteran guy, 5.5 rebounds per game. He's not a stretch the floor kind of guy. I think he was 3 of 24 from 3 this year. But he is a cerebral frontline guy. He is also a good decision maker and understands, he's got a, maybe a guard's perspective, like I sometimes say about bigger players, a guard's perspective on the game sometimes. And that's one of the things I like about him. At 6'9", 235, this is a guy that checks a lot of boxes for you on your front line. So if you're looking at a frontline guy that's not a true 5, maybe not a mainstay at 5, but could be flexible enough to give you minutes there to help in that situation. He's not a stretch 4 again by any stretch. He's not a 24% career 3-point shooter. He's 12.5% last year. I mean, that's just not what he is. But again, nearly 16 points per game the previous season, 13.3 last year, led Indiana. That would not be a bad addition. Now, there's some other schools there. Does he want to go back and play closer to home in Miami? And I didn't write down the other 3. I think Michigan was in the mix on him as well. Seems like Auburn and Kansas are in on everybody, and rightfully so, especially when you're talking frontline. But there's some other names. So Malik Renew does, so keep an eye on that. I would love to see is Somtu Cyril, the 6'11", 260-pound freshman that Calipari signed at Kentucky and then ended up at Georgia as a freshman. Really good per 40-minute numbers. I think 13. If you looked at it, because he only played He only played, man, I'm getting a ton of these calls from college coaches and the like. I've had a couple here. It's always good to get source information. And we'll get right onto those when I get off of here. Um, but Psalm 2 Cyril's a guy I'd really like to see. I mean, when you look at him from a per 40-minute standard, because I think he played just over 14 minutes per game, but per 40, over 13 points, 11 rebounds, and over nearly 4.5 blocks per game. Shoots into the 60s percentile from the field. So everything's around the basket. Big body, big, strong, athletic guy. Wouldn't mind seeing him go into the portal, and maybe that's something that happens. Nick Pringle, all that SEC experience, we've talked about him. He's still out there. Arkansas's contacted him. 6'10", South Carolina last year, 2 years at Alabama. Had a really good game. His best SEC game of the season when Arkansas lost. Felt like it was by 50, but they lost by 19 points at South Carolina. He really got the Gamecocks off to a great start in that game. He was especially effective early in that game at both ends on the glass and scoring around the basket. So those are some of the usual suspects. There are some newer names in the portal. When you look front line, Malik Ewan just went in. Florida State. He was a third-year player. He actually is a 2-year college player. He did not play much at Ole Miss 3 years ago. Didn't play. He had a gap year. I don't know if he went to JUCO or where he ended up. But this last year at Florida State, 6'11", 230. He is not a rim protector, but 14.2 points, 7.6 rebounds, 26 minutes per game. So his statistically, when you look at him, it's almost identical to what Jonas Aidoo's numbers were. The difference was Jonas Aidoo played on an Elite Eight team, was all SEC defensive team, and a much better rim protector and shot blocker than Malik Ewan. But if you look at it from scoring and rebounding, it's very similar. 59, nearly 60% from the field. There's a name to look at. Henry Vasav, a sophomore, 7-footer from Estonia in the portal out of Arizona. We know that's one of the top teams in the Big 12 this year. I think they finished tied for third with BYU. They were right behind Texas Tech in first place, obviously Houston. But he got 9.4 points per game, 5 rebounds, 1.1 blocks, played about 21 minutes per game. He's in the portal. Another name that just went in there was the big Spaniard at UCLA. I got to watch it. He really came on. He started playing better at the end of the year. He started to, you know how it is with freshmen. I mean, Carter Knox, Billy Richmond were better in the final third of the year, and they, started getting better at midseason. The last 10 or so games, they were really good and effective. Well, this guy is similar, 7'3" Spaniard at UCLA. I can't even read my own writing. 6.4 points, 4 rebounds, 1.6 blocks, but only playing 13 minutes per game. So, I know Big Z's gone, but when we looked at his minutes in his 15 games at Kentucky, his averages, when you looked at how playing like 11 minutes, were actually pretty strong when you extrapolate it out to 40-minute production. And so this is a guy, again, in the portal. I think some of these guys are already starting to take visits and they're doing Zooms, and we don't necessarily even know if Arkansas has made contact. But I wanted to really focus on big men today and go through some of that. I don't know that all of these guys would be great fits, other than Arkansas needs more than one on the front line. And so depth is going to matter here. Size matters. Paint presence matters. It's so interesting because Big Z would block 2 shots a game. That's really good. But everything else, man, he wasn't a strong rebounder. He had 2 or 3 double-doubles somehow at some point, but for the most part, consistently. And he just got bullied at both ends in the paint. And so you need to get guys that aren't just tall, but even if they are wiry, they're going to give you something. I mentioned Morez Johnson off to Michigan. Guath, what's his first name? I always get these names jacked up. Magoon Guath, the 7-footer that, has a lot of promising attributes everywhere. I mean, he can shoot the 3 a little bit, rim protector, rebounder. I think he was the freshman of the year and the defensive player of the year in the Mountain West as a freshman. San Diego State, well, that was a bubble team. He went in the portal, and, we were talking about him a little bit on one of these, and now he's back to San Diego State. So that happened yesterday as well. So two frontline guys that we've talked about that are gone. And Morris Johnson was a guy again that Arkansas was really serious about. Probably top 2 or 3 on their big board in terms of what was out there still. And so that one's gone. All right, so we talked big men. Let's talk. Keshan Hall had his Zoom meeting with John Calipari and the coaching staff. I interviewed him over the weekend and put an article out where he's talking about, his main points of contact. He'd been talking heavily with Chin Coleman, associate head coach, Ronnie Brewer. Well, he had the big meeting with Cal, and we were talking last night, kind of at the end of that McDonald's All-American game. We circled back, and he was like, man, that went great. He goes, that Zoom call was great. He goes, I love talking with Coach, meeting with Coach Calipari and the entire staff. He told me that it was, he was excited about the thought of playing for a legendary coach like that. And he said some of their talking points were how they would develop him, how they would use him. He even specifically said they showed me how they would use me in space to help me score. And he's a guy in the previous interview, he told me that he wanted to go somewhere where he could win, be part of winning and get to an NCAA tournament, which he hasn't done. He's played at UNLV a season. He played at George Mason a season. The previous Arkansas staff recruited him. I've gone through all of it. Back 2 days before the portal opened, I told you that Arkansas would be a heavy player here if he ended up in the portal, which seemed like a foregone conclusion, because why are we talking about interest for a guy that's technically not in? If he's not probably going in, he's probably going in. Arkansas is not the only school. He's had multiple Zooms. I think he also had one maybe set up with LSU that yesterday. Had some other ones. So, but Keshan Hall, what's interesting to me when he talked about playing for a winner and being in the NCAA tournament, he said he wanted to do that without limiting what his role has been. Okay, well, there's some measure of that may work out just fine at a place like Arkansas. Let's not forget when Arkansas started 11-2, and before the 0-5 start, but even to some degree as you went 0-5, you consistently were only getting double-figure scoring and production around the board from your 2 best players at that time, which were Adu Thero and Boogie Flant. You weren't consistently getting game in and game out that kind of production. When you looked at what Arkansas started to do as the freshmen improved, Knox and Richmond, as attrition forced guys into different roles and to make them more accountable, guys like Nelly Davis, even DJ Wagner, what you started to see was not only Arkansas winning games, not only individual players getting better, but if you were paying attention, most games, and we talked about on these segments over and over, I'm like, Arkansas's down to a 7 rotation, and it may not be every night. Everybody's producing heavily, but usually 5 of the 7 are. And so it got to a point where it was not uncommon to see 4 or 5 guys scoring in double figures, getting good shots, getting opportunities, being productive. And when you have success like that, it trickles down to other parts of your game. It impacts other things you're doing on the court when you feel like you're involved, when you feel like you're plugged in. So with Keshan Hall, what have we talked about in his past? I mentioned it. I talked about it that first time I brought his name up before he was ever in the portal and before the portal opened. There was perception from folks I talked to back in the day, maybe he's a little bit me first. Maybe there's some, maturity stuff there. And I even said the caveat, look, you never know coming from different folks what their motivations are. Are some of these things exaggerated? Are there some real stuff there? What really plays a part in some of this stuff? But here's a guy that led the Big 12 in scoring, Keshan Hall. He's 6'7", 230, lefty slasher, can play with physicality, can knock down the 3, nearly 35% on good volume from 3, an 80+% free throw shooter, big rebounder, 7 rebounds per game, 19 points per game. Again, led the Big 12, and he was all Big 12 and his one and done at Central Florida. So I'm looking at this guy as a guy that would be a good fit. Now, when we talk retention, we're going to circle back to Keshan Hall, but the Zoom call went well. He was really excited about it. And then the question I asked him was, which will come back, I think, somewhat to retention, well, do you plan to visit Arkansas? Is that the next step? And he says, I don't know yet. We'll see soon. We will see soon. And so that could be 2 things, or more than 2 things, but the 2 things that come to mind is, one, he's got a little bit of a process, and of course, NIL is going to play into all this. But the other part is Arkansas's got a couple of really big question marks And when you start looking at wing, we talked about one of them, Nate Ament. He's still out there. Big wings, jumbo wings that can factor 3-4. And Adu Thero, we still have a question mark there because, the more and more you look at mocks, I had an NBA scout tell me 40 to 60 for his draft range. The more you look at what NIL could be compared to, maybe a guaranteed contract, middle back end of second rounds, those things still get worked out. But the money's not incredible. It's good, right? 2.4 million over 2 years is really good, but he may be able to clock that for 1 year at Arkansas. And in worst case, he's still a back end second round projection in a year, or maybe he does enough to improve his stock. So some guys want to get out of school. They're ready to start that pro clock. Learning and training at the pro level is different than what you can do to improve yourself at college. You can be in a faster track there. The pro folks want it, get guys sooner typically. So there's a lot of things that could weigh into that. But I've told Arkansas is really stepping up in NIL across the board, and part of it is to try to retain him. So when we get into, start talking retention, that's going to matter. That's going to matter. I think Adu Thero, if you got him back and potentially Nate Ament, you don't really have a need as much for a guy like Keshan Hall, who's going to expect to be one of your main focal points. I don't know that there's enough room in that scenario. At the same time, if you keep Adu Thero, because of the differences between he and Keshan Hall and the way you can use both of those guys, you can actually play them together at times. And so I think it makes sense that he would still be in the mix if you're only going to get one of the two in terms of keeping Adu Thero or getting Nate Ament. So there's several ways this can play out. And so maybe, I don't know yet in terms of a visit, I don't know yet. We will see soon is maybe he's keeping an eye on what's developing with Arkansas. Maybe they're being very candid about these possibilities in this Zoom call. Hey, so those are the kind of things you expect from the caliber of recruiter like John Calipari. He is a level player, man, with these young people. He deals an even hand, man. He's not an over-promiser. And so I think that is what you really keep an eye on here. And the fact that Keshan Hall was genuinely excited about that meeting. All right, I'm pushing an hour. You guys know how I roll. So right before we get into some more on the retention, because I've got some intel there, I've got a little nugget of intel on Lamar Wilkerson. He's today supposed to take an unofficial visit to SMU. Remember, tomorrow starts the clock for the April 3rd through 10th dead period. And really, effectively, what that is you can't take on-campus visits. Coaches can't go off-campus for visits. They can still communicate, just no visits of any kind. But Lamar Wilkerson has already started doing some Zoom calls. And we've seen some of the names of some of these schools. We know what his list is. We've seen some of the names on the top of that list. Arkansas, Duke, Kentucky, Louisville, SMU was in there, but Kansas. And I'm told I have a source that's connected with the Sam Houston State coaching staff and is telling me in some of those recent conversations, they keep saying that Kansas is really making a hard push for Lamar Wilkerson. Well, that doesn't surprise me. Bill Self, they got a lot of needs. They got guys in the portal. Rylan Griffin went in the portal. He's a shooter that started out at Alabama, didn't quite have the year at Kansas. And who knows? Could he be a guy heading back to Alabama? I haven't even paid attention today. I didn't even check on him before I came on here. But Kansas is really pushing hard for Lamar Wilkerson. I still think, to me, this is the number one. If he's not you've got to get two frontline guys. So you can make a case, well, the top priority is frontline. Okay, I'm not going to argue that. But in terms of what a definite need is a guy, a veteran big guard, 6'4", 6'5", can play 2 or 3 to step in with what's vacated by Nelly Davis, because you need that, in my opinion, in tandem with guys like Acuff and Malik Thomas just coming out of high school. You still need a guy that can do that. You also needed to improve your three-point shooting. And this guy definitely checks that box. I think to me, when you combine the Arkansas need in the backcourt there, what this guy's level of talent is in terms of he's a high-volume scorer. He does other things. And, oh, by the way, he's arguably the best three-point shooter out there when you combine the volume on scoring, the volume on 3-point shooting, the efficiency on 3-point shooting. Remember, 8 attempts per game from three, 44.5% stuff. That is Chaz Lanier numbers coming out of North Florida and carried over to Tennessee. Not saying he would be everything Chaz Lanier is, but you get the point, and Arkansas was missing that. In my opinion, Wilkerson is arguably the number one player on your board just because of all of that. Not that that position is your number one need right now. And that can impact who becomes number one on your board. But I'm saying there is a case to be made that he is and should be, right? And we went through it. I've spoken directly with Lamar Wilkerson. I've talked about his recruitment with him. There's a lot of that he asked me to not share, and I won't. I shared a little bit. And I still think Arkansas is a major player here. And that Arkansas could very well be the leader in the clubhouse, like one source has told me they are. He's an Ashdown kid to begin with. He grew up, dreamed of being a Razorback. I told you guys that we talked about that. And I covered him extensively in high school, but it's been a minute. He won a 3A state title at Ashdown in 2018-19 season. But I've covered it, paid attention to him, and focused on what he's doing out there. And this to me is as big a part of what Arkansas could accomplish in the portal as well as the front line. At the end of the day, I've said they're probably, based on retention, probably going to be anywhere from 2 to 4 out of the portal. Nate Ament also factors into how that looks. And we know, just going through the usual suspects, in addition to Acuff and Malik Thomas, who are going to be focal points, guys like Kareem Artal and Isaiah Seeley out of high school, out of Springdale, Arkansas, top 75 4-star 6'7" combo guard. Artal, who knows how tall Kareem Artal is, 6'7" to 6'9", maybe right in between 6'8". Another 3-4 kind of guy, not an enforcer, not a heavy rebounder. And those might be back-end rotation guys. If you expand to 11, maybe they're 10 and 11. We'll see what actually ends up happening. But to me, guys like Lamar Wilkerson, regardless of your needs at that center spot, I think you cannot lose sight of how important a guy like that would be to this team. And so, in my opinion, someone like him, and I don't know how many others out there we would compare to him. There's some other really good guards, good shooters, but he's number one on my board. I think he's number one in that role on Arkansas's board. And is he still the number one overall player, given now that you don't need just one big man, you need two? One of those is going to be your top priority and maybe your overall top priority on the big board. So I said all that to say, however you want to slice it up, your top 3 or 4, in my opinion, are based on the names we just said: Keshan Hall, Lamar Wilkerson, and a couple of bigs. And I ran through a ton of those names. Those, to me, right now, out of the portal, the way it looks now, are your priorities. Those can change based on multiple factors. Where did you value these guys in NIL? What are other teams doing in NIL play on the same guys you're after? And did you make adjustments? And did you have someone else high enough on your board where you're shifting to that? You always got to think about that, because you may have 3 guys at the same position you list as 1A, 1B, and they're not really backups as much as they are not quite as high up in the priority, because that's how Calipari does. He's not one of those guys that's out there racking up second and third options. He's taken what a lot of teams would consider their top option, but for him, it's an order of 1A, and 1B. He's got 3 guys at a position that anybody else would consider priority number 1. So you got to think about that as well, and how NIL is going to make those considerations, maybe shift things. For all I know, Morris Johnson wasn't their top guy on the front line because, again, of the NIL offer. I would never say they miscalculated that, because the calculation's always based on how they value it, who else they think they can get, and who else and what all's out there. So I didn't want to insinuate that that's what they did, other than to say what I thought the value would be for him. For anybody, I thought Arkansas was just maybe off a little bit. And so all of this is important. When we look at retention, I have a little bit of an intel nugget here for you. I've been talking about Trevor Brazil. He's the last man standing on that front line, as far as we know, in terms of a guy that can play the 5. I do fear if he comes back, that's not what he is. and Brazil does a nice job interchangeably at the 4-5, or at least he finished the season that way. And I've said, that I've had a source information that a couple of people, not just one, a couple of people for weeks have been saying he'd like to come back to Arkansas. So when I talked about the draft status of guys like Boogie Flan and Adu Thero with that NBA scout a few days ago, that was over the weekend. I think I talked to him on Saturday. I think it was Sunday when I tweeted out what he told me. I talked about it on Pig Trail Nation later that day on Sunday. Talked about it, what was it, my Monday segment here. What I didn't tell you is I also asked about Trevor Brazile, the scout. And the scout said, look, I don't see him as going in. I don't see a path for him for this draft. I just don't see it. Even if he got invited to the combine again, maybe there's a way if he got workouts with, all it takes is one team. But just in general, I just don't see that for him. Well, yesterday I had an NBA scout call me to talk about Trevor Brazile. Not the same kind of NBA scout, but still an NBA scout. Some of them work directly for teams. Other ones work as floaters, helping out talent agencies and different things. But I talked to another scout evaluator, NBA scout and talent evaluator, called me to talk about Trevor Brazile. And I mean, right out of his mouth, I thought he wanted to talk about the draft part of it, but he was trying to puzzle together his remaining eligibility because he was getting confused about the COVID year, his injury season. Did he play enough? Was it a situation where he got his hardship, which I think is what they got and why he's got this extra year. But even if that's not the case, I mean, he's only played 4 years, and if it's the COVID year, it happened at a time when he moved over to Arkansas where he would still have that as well. Either way, he's got a 5th year to play. Because remember, he was 1 year at Missouri, 3 now at Arkansas, so he's got another one. But that was really where he wanted to go with that. And then, so I said, okay, so NBA draft, and he goes, not a chance. I don't want to. He was brutally honest. I'm bringing that here. You may think that's inappropriate for me to share it that way, but that's what he said. He just blurted it out that way. So that's 2 NBA people I've talked to. So to me, if that's going to be, if he puts his name in and leaves the door open, that may be for more feedback to see what he needs to do. Maybe he jumps anyway and takes a chance on himself. But the feedback I'm now more consistently getting, obviously, in a small sample size, it's anecdotal. But I don't see him on any mocks either. That's one door you think maybe he's closing for him right now. Not forever, but in terms of what the decision is now. And you're getting feedback that he'd like to come back to Arkansas. You got to think the NIL presence for Brazile is going to increase to keep him so he doesn't go in the portal. Maybe he goes in the portal to make sure his NIL's right. I don't know. But to me, he had opportunities to leave last year. Remember, he was entered both in the portal. He went to the NBA draft combine, and he ended up back at Arkansas. He had a damn good thing going with John Calipari at the end of this season. Something that he rode off into the sunset with. It's not like, the whole team had a stinker of a game at South Carolina. And really, other than that, he was plugged in, playing hard, playing like I haven't seen him play consistently at both ends, had multiple double-doubles. He was reliable. Now, he made a few mistakes. He had some late mistakes in that Ole Miss loss in the SEC tournament. Maybe rushed some 3 shots here. Let's not nitpick. The guy was fantastic. And right now, he's your only holdover on that front line. Again, Thero, I don't, even though I count 3-4 guys as part of your front line equation, they're not really when you start talking bigs, that's not really where you're sinking your teeth into. And so in addition to Brazile, I think you still need 2 out of the portal. But let's say you keep Brazile. I think I've said this before, Carter Knox and Billy Richmond are not just wants, they're needs. They are needs. And if push comes to shove and a guy like Carter Knox is not going to be happy if you're adding a Keshan Hall or this Abdi Bashir that's trying to set up 6'7" out of Monmouth, big time scorer and 3-point shooter that's trying to set up a Zoom with Arkansas in the portal. If that's going to squeeze a guy like Carter Knox out, even Billy Richmond, I say, look, those guys have continuity in your system. They both played really well. Keep those guys. But I don't see it as, I don't know what their thought process individually are, But just looking at it and knowing how players can work together and what the strengths and weaknesses are of players, I don't see a problem bringing in a Keshan Hall or a Nate Ament and keeping guys like Carter Knox and Billy Richmond in terms of how they would fit. They could be on the court together. There's enough versatility in what those guys can do that you can play them together. We saw Knox and Richmond for long stretches. I mean, not all the time, but there were stretches of games we saw them on the floor together. And Richmond kind of playing your trigger point as your third, became this, I guess, the second option on the ball behind DJ when DJ would go out. But there's ways to make it work, and everybody gets to eat. Remember, Arkansas was at a point where 4 or 5 guys were consistently getting in double-figure scoring in games or close to it, and then the next game they would if they were at 8 or 9. I mean, Calipari recruits at a high level and makes it work for most everybody. So an hour and 5 minutes in, I'm getting everything all in at once, I guess, kind of putting it all in here together. So you can do your pecking order on big board. I don't know how if people out there do that. Some of the junkies might do it, but for me, it's probably Lamar Wilkerson 1 as the best overall, based on maybe not the biggest need positionally, but everything else he brings to it, and the ability to be your leading scorer. But I also look at the front line, and I can't argue that maybe in reality right now, the main focus is a big man, a quality big man. And in a sense, because you don't have returning numbers there or sign guys there from the high school ranks, that you just have to make that your top priority. That's understandable. A guy like Yaxel Lindenborg, if he's really going to be in play for Arkansas, he's number 1 on your board. And I'm sorry, Mr. Wilkerson, but you're right there at 2. But your top backcourt guy on your board. So that pretty much wraps it up for me today. We went through a lot of names on the front line. We talked, obviously shared on Keshan Hall's Zoom experience with the Razorbacks. That went really well. Lamar Wilkerson, a little intel there. All these teams are pursuing him, but it sounds like Kansas is really, really beating a path to that door. We went through the retention. DJ Wagner, I didn't bring up. I guess I should throw that in there. I mean, you want him back. Last time I was on, I was saying, he's going to deal with another alpha lead guard that's going to have a big role coming in and be playing on the ball a lot. Is he okay with that? If I was comparing Boogie Fland and Darius Acuff, I wouldn't compare them to each other. I'd compare what are their comparisons to Wagner. And Acuff is a smaller Wagner. I think he's more nuanced. As he plays with a better, more true. So when you say true point guard, people, when you think old school, you think more facilitate, less shots. But now your scoring lead guards are more and more of a thing. But he's a true scoring lead guard in that he is a very effective facilitator. He reads the floor well. He makes good reads and decisions. He plays with really good pace, and he takes care of the ball. He's better, more nuanced, in my opinion, as that kind of prospect to run your team than even DJ Wagner. But DJ Wagner's taller, a little bigger, stronger at this stage for sure. And the comparison is, when I say I would make a more of a comparison to DJ, is on Acuff's drive game. It reminds me a little bit of Wagner, his drive game. And I think, obviously, because of Wagner's strength and a little bigger size and a couple of years more advanced and playing at the college level already, now 2 years in, he's probably a little tougher finisher right now. But that's okay. But DJ Hall, you of course you would love to have him back. Another obvious veteran guy that helped you get to a Sweet 16. He struggled when he was sharing duties with Boogie Fland. So is this a guy that's looking to move on one way or another based on that? Or is he someone that they've convinced these guys, look, we'll make this work? Remember, Wagner didn't have a choice at Kentucky. He was in the backcourt with Reed Shepard, Antonio Reeves, Dillingham. All of those guys got turns playing the lead, playing on the ball, and we saw it this year at Arkansas. Fland was your primary one when he was healthy. Wagner was next. Billy Richmond was your third lead guard. He had, even then when Fland was healthy, there were times when you saw him initiating the offense. Somebody was on the bench with foul trouble or whatever. We knew the roster wasn't all that deep. But so retention's going to matter. Thank you for joining me today on HogvilleNET YouTube Live. I'm pushing 70 minutes. That's insane. I really need help, don't I, folks? I'm a little slow rolling and probably extra repetitive today, but thank you for joining me. I'm Kevin McPherson. Please hit subscribe, like, and share if you haven't done already. And we're going to jump right back in. There might have been some breaking news on the comments. I didn't even really eyeball them much today. I'm going to be searching around. Nick Pringle, what's going on? We can't. Yeah, just nothing looks. I don't see anything on here that might be breaking. Until next time, it could be later today. It could be a couple of days. Thanks for being here. Take care of yourselves, and we'll see you soon.